Hey everybody, today we're going to be focusing on how to paint the bone sabers for the swarmlord for the mighty tyranids. So, for today, we're going to be focusing on one bone sword, but since the swarmlord has four of them, this will apply for all four of them as well. For this, we're going to start off with a base coat of corn red. Shake up your paint. Okay, so for this, just take some corn red and put it on the palette. Clean it down just a little bit. So, for this, you're going to base coat all over the bone saber. So, all this, we're going to focus on the top. Try not to get anybody on the exoskeleton, but don't worry if you do, you can just fix that up later. Okay, that's the corn red base coated. All right, so for this we're gonna focus on something different. So for this, while we're waiting for this to dry, we're gonna do something really quick. So for this, we're gonna look at the what I did for the bone for the arms. For the swarmlord, he has adrenal glands. I already painted those. So for this, we're gonna be using an edge highlight for the adrenal glands, and that's pretty much it. For this, you're going to need a very, very fine brush. For this, you can use a small layer brush if you're using Citadel, but for this, I'm going to use a 5-0. So, for this, all we're going to do is we're going to take some Fire Dragon Bright. So, all we're going to do this, shake it up a little bit. Just a second. Okay, for this, we're going to take some Fire Dragon Bright and put it on the palette. Not too much, but you want enough on the palette just to make sure you have enough for what you need. A little more water. Perfect. Okay, always remember to do this to your brush so you got a nice fine tip. All right, for this, all we're going to do is we're going to edge highlight the adrenal glands. It's going to be very difficult, but don't worry, just take your time. So for this, and just take your time. You do have to go around every adrenal gland, but don't worry. Just be neat and tidy and just take your time. All right, that's the adrenal glands done. All right, with our bone sword now dry, we're going to shade it. Might sound weird to shade like a flat area, but it's just so we get that darkened red that you see like on High Fleet Leviathan bone swords. So, for this, we're going to use a shade. You could, of course, use Carabert Crimson, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to shade using Nuln Oil. Keep in mind this is a new formulation of Nuln Oil, so if you have the old one, that's fine as well. Okay, for this, all we're going to do, take some Nuln Oil and put on the palette like so. Just like this. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to shade all over it. For this, literally all over the bone sword. Take some more, and also shade the bottom part as well. Don't forget about the other side. All right, that's the shade done. Okay, so even though our shade is still wet, since it's on a flat area, we can highlight right away. So for this, you're going to need your fine brush again. So for this, I'm going to return back to my 5-0 brush. So all we're going to do is we're going to take the next paint that goes after corn red. So for this, we're going to use Wazdecker red. Take some Wazdecker red. Make sure your paints are always good. This one's still good. Perfect. Take some Wazdecker red and put on your palette. Not too much. Okay, so for this, we're going to thin it down a little bit because it's a layer paint, but you do have to thin it down a little bit. Okay, there we go. So for this, we're going to highlight the edges. So for this, we're only going to focus on the front, so to make it look like sharpness. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to do an edge highlight. And don't worry if you have any excess that's going down the middle of the blade. Don't worry, you can just wipe it off. And if you want, you could highlight the serrations right here, and also the edges on the bone on the sword hilt. Take some more Wazdecker. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And we're going to do a small highlight down the middle. Very, very, very little, but just be careful. Just be careful. Yeah, if you want, you can just wipe it away. So for this, we're going to go up just about here. That's it. Same for the other side. Thin it down a little bit if it starts to go a little goopy. So for this, we're going to focus on the other side. So, and I almost forgot, just make sure you want to highlight the spine of the blade too. All right, that's our bone sword highlighted. Okay, so now we're going to do an optional step. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to do an even lighter red for highlight. For this, we're going to use Evil Sun Scarlet. So shake up your paint. So take a little bit of Evil Sun Scarlet from the pot and put it on the palette. Not too much. Thin it down just a smidge. There we go. So now this is going to be very difficult, so you're going to have to be very, very, very careful. So for this, all we're going to do is we're going to edge highlight the parts right here. So for this, on the very, very edges, but watch this. I'm going to show you an even better technique. Just highlight the corners right here. On the other side, just the same thing. And you don't need to do this on the serrations, but you could, of course, do it if you want to. So, oops. And just apply very, very little to the sword hilt. All right, that's our bone saber done. So, if you want to look at more tutorials on how to do bone sabers, you can of course look on YouTube, or you can look up on painting tutorials so that you can look for the bone sword instead of if you don't want to use the bone saber for your swarmlord. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Happy painting. Bye bye.